It's always fun to see people dance in the background to that song. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to A Fictional Escapist. My name is Kris, and today's video is episode 3 of the Queer Corner, which is a celebration for queer people all over the rainbow to just celebrate who we are. My big thing is that I don't think Pride should be once a year or even once a month. We should be able to celebrate at all times, at all walks of the rainbow, and this is a safe space to do that. But we are joined by some new faces today, so we're going to do a round of introductions. I need to move people again because it moved you. And now we can do a round of introductions. So, Jeff, Rodger, you have been here before, but give us a quick introduction, and then we'll go through to Steve and Jay to tell us all about yourselves.
Hi, my name's Jeff, and I run the Instagram page, Page Glue. Yeah, I just blog about books that I read.
I'm Rodger with the YouTube channel Rodger's Reads. I read primarily fantasy books, and I'm always looking for better LGBT representation in adult fantasy works because it seems to be few and far between if you're trying to find it.
Do I go now?
Over to you, Steve.
Okay. So I'm Hugh Westenra. I'm a fantasy and horror writer. I'm also an academic expert in monsters and the monstrous. Guess that's it. I'm from Canada, sort of.
Hi, I'm Jay Tallsquall, and I am a new author with a couple books that have come out with asexual representation, and just excited to be here. I'm still jamming out from the opening intro music.
Yeah.
Jay, while we've got you, you have a new book coming out. Is it tomorrow? Well, tomorrow my time, but Monday your time to celebrate Asexual Awareness Week. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so first book, Legacy of the Vermilion Blade, came out last Asexual Awareness Week, and I really wanted to sort of keep up with that cadence. So book 2, Promise of the Betrayer's Dagger, it comes out on Monday, and I'm super excited. One of the sort of fan favorite characters is Osmond, and so we sort of follow him on his journey during his exile and sort of finding himself, and actually gives us some bi awareness into our narrative and as one of our main characters.
As a bisexual, love that. Did not read the back of the book and realize it was about Osmond. Can't wait.
Oh, sorry, spoilers.
Ready to go.
I was going to say, but it's right on the back. So
yeah, no, it's on the back. It's just my fault for not having read it. But that's awesome. Now we've got some events happening around this year, and what I want to talk to you, Jeff, specifically about that you do every year is Halloween. So, can you tell us a little bit about what that is? Is this something that you've come up with? Is this an event that you do with other people? But how's it come about?
3 years ago, I'd never read any horror books, and I just wanted to try it out. But I wanted it to be queer because I just like reading queer books in general. And so I just started reading, and I realized that I really love horror. And then the following year, last year, I started to talk about it on my Instagram page. And then this year I officially made it an event with infographic and, hey, everyone, let's participate. Halloween, I came up with the term myself, but actually a bunch of drag queen, Halloween nights are often called Halloween. So if you look up the hashtag Halloween, it'll be a bunch of drag queens dressed as a Frankenstein or whatever.
Good marketing tactic.
Yep. But it's basically just, the challenge is just to read queer horror during the month of October. Horror, in this case, being anything that's within the genre itself or kind of adjacent to it, murder mysteries, thrillers, dystopians, historical fiction about awful things, just any kind of any kind of story where that kind of reflects queer people's experience of the world in a horrific way, which is all too common. And then in terms of what queer means, it could be the author themselves are queer, or that the perspective characters are queer.
Have you had any standouts from your reading experience so far?
Oh yeah, like I've had a few new favorites. One of them was The Brightlands by John Fram. It's like a police detective kind of thriller horror with some like weird paranormal elements and some strange sexual aspects that I just couldn't put down. It was crazy good. The other one that was a big standout was Our Share of Night. I don't know if you could see, by Mariana Enriquez, which is like this Argentinian 70s, 80s, 90s, like Aleister Crowley cults, like magic, sex magic story. Yeah, so every time I do this, I find like a new favorite book easily.
Steve, do you want to take this opportunity to tell us about your queer horror that came out on October the 13th?
Yeah, I can do. I also want to say like those books are both on my TBR, so I'm excited to read those. It was cool to hear you talk about those ones. Yeah, so my book, the last time I tried to do this, as I was telling Kris, I just sort of like rambled about nonsense for like 5 minutes, so I'm just going to read the back of the book this time and not ramble about nonsense. Okay, so the quick pitch, which I'm reading off a screen like a cool person, is Queer BuzzFeed Unsolved. A washed-up actor turned cryptid hunting YouTube darling receives a video from his presumed dead mother that leads him to an isolated island that was once a gay conversion camp and which may house the monsters he swears aren't real. And I will do the long one off the Goodreads. Tyler Kyle doesn't believe in monsters. A washed-up 30-year-old actor and reluctant cryptid investigator, Tyler is used to playing the Scully to his best friend Josh's Mulder on their stupidly popular YouTube channel. But when Tyler receives previously unseen footage of the B-movie bombshell mother who abandoned him 18 years ago, footage linked to an isolated island in the Canadian wilderness, the mystery is one conspiracy he's determined to investigate. The fact that following the scent gives Tyler an excuse to run away from the straight Josh, whom he drunkenly made out with, is just the cherry on the shit sundae. But Echo Island isn't what it seems. Its eerily scenic veneer hides a twisted secret buried in its roots as a gay conversion camp, and as Tyler retraces his mother's footsteps, he discovers a supernatural connection between the residents and the island, one they seem to think Tyler and his mother share. Even worse, the footage of Tyler's mom came from someone on the island, a stalker whose obsessive fascination with both Tyler and Josh is about to make Tyler wish he hadn't gone this one alone. Puppeteered by his stalker, searching for his mother, and debating whether it's possible to queerbait yourself, Tyler comes to realize that it doesn't matter so much whether you believe in monsters if they believe in you. the book.
Honestly, sold. It sounds so cool.
Yeah,
It's very cool.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a big mishmash of a lot of things. So yeah, sorry.
Which is like one of my favorite things about the indie world is that you can basically do what you want. You can mesh things together and just have fun with it. And you're not jailed to some publishing house that just wants to fit in a box.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds very cool.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing, both of you. I will put Jeff's Instagram down below, and there'll be links to all the books that we talk about in this, as always, down in the description box. Now, before we jump into like the main section of the chat where everyone can share everything, sorry, Rodger, just sitting there in the corner, raising eyebrows at sex magic. You know, that's what we do here. I just want to chat about an author that Jeff and I have started reading. How far are you through the book, Jeff?
30%, 110 pages.
Right, you get the gist of where we're going, I think, within the first 30% of the book. So with Asexual Awareness Week coming up and not knowing a whole lot of asexual authors, I was so blessed to, get to interact with Jay and learn more about, your story through Legacy. I thought we'd shout out another asexual author, Sydney Koo. So on the back, it says Sydney Koo is a non-binary, aromantic, and asexual writer. So we'll celebrate this story. I read it last month, and I think the back of this book sort of does it more justice than I can as someone who's not a YA reader. So I'll read this out to everyone, and then quick sentences on our experiences, Jeff. Between surviving high school and working at her aunt's dumpling shop, all she wants is to find time for her friends and make sure no one finds out that she's half spider demon. But when she accidentally kills and eats a man in front of the most popular girl in school, she discovers she might not be the scariest thing in the shadows. Uncover an extraordinary world of demons and witches where the ones you love can hurt you the most and hiding your true self can get you killed. So, 30% in, Jeff, what are your initial thoughts?
I'm not loving it, but
Tell me
that
more.
doesn't mean. But that doesn't mean that it's not good. It's about a girl who's like going to this like private school, but she very much doesn't belong there. She is a spider demon, and so she already feels like she doesn't really belong. And also like I don't know if it's right to say that she's poor, but she's definitely working class. And she's like attending this private school, so she's surrounded by all these people whose lives are very different from hers. And like her world experiences are like really well written. She lives with her aunt, who is like I think Malaysian Chinese is the nationality, and there is that dynamic of like being an immigrant child, especially like an Asian immigrant child, where there's like high expectations on academic success, and the kind of pressures that she feels from her aunts. Like that's all very like portrayed very realistically and very like intensely. I would say like I felt very stressed about her. I'm very concerned
Some of those
about
scenes
her.
with the aunt, they don't get better.
No. Yeah, so that's it's for me it's been like quite an emotionally intense story so far. And then like her being a spider demon is like cool. For me the main reason why I'm not enjoying it is that it is like high school drama. There's like this one girl who's like the most popular girl and everyone's obsessed with her and I don't care about her. I don't think that this girl that everyone's interested in, I'm not interested in her at all.
I will say she gets better. The
yeah?
popular girl
Okay.
gets better as it goes on,
Okay, all right. Well,
in my opinion.
sure, yeah. But the other thing is that like we've forgotten to say that it's the author's name is Sydney, but it's also set in the city of Sydney, Australia, and it's set in Sydney's Chinatown. And so when Ji, the main character, like is going about town, like I grew up in Sydney, and it's very accurate to the city and how you get around, and it's depicting the city well. So yeah, like I think it's a very authentic experience, and it's like a lot of things have been written like very truthfully and emotionally truthfully, like just all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it's YA. There's like high school girl drama. It is what it is. It has its audience.
Yeah, I'll pretty much say the same thing. I didn't not like it in the end. I thought the story and the elements were executed quite well, but I'm not the target audience for this book,
Yeah.
very clearly. So from, I guess, a marketing perspective, I can see where that target audience would be. Just touching on the Australian setting, I think that people who aren't Australian are going to miss a lot in this book because it is very specific to places in Sydney. So if you're not familiar with those places, then some of those settings like you're going to miss out on. But I think like as an Australian, a lot of it was nostalgic for me to be able to experience that again. I think the relationship dynamics are written really well in this book. And at the end of it, the takeaway is self-acceptance over trying to have other people accept you and putting so much stock in that, just remembering that you are your own person, and at the end of the day, you learn to accept yourself. And I thought I really liked that aspect of the book, which does happen over the course of the arc. But yeah, it does deal with a lot of teenage drama. Some of the horror elements are really cool with the spider demon. So if you like those sort of things, you might enjoy it. But yeah, the setting, if you're not Australian, it might lose you a little bit on the setting.
When I like opened the first page, I opened up like a note on my phone, like, oh, because like Jess and Rodger are not going to understand this, and I started like writing certain things, and then I just stopped because there were too many.
You're so nice. I was like, they'll figure it out.
No,
And then
they won't
Rodger
figure
never
it
picked up the book.
out. Yeah. Well, Jess is gonna definitely. And then I was just like, no.
Yeah, I
can't.
think
And I
Sydney-
tortured myself with
Active
Red
interpreter.
Rising and Golden Sun instead.
Yeah.
Trash.
I can't wait to do unpopular opinions with you, except I think you like Joe Abercrombie and I don't.
He's fine. I don't think I would say that I liked it. It was better than I expected, but I expected to loathe it with every fiber of my being, and it was fine.
Rodger and I have some
thing-
spicy Instagram stories conversations.
The one thing I'll add about this is that like one of the reasons why I like queer horror is that sometimes us queer people are the monster in the closet, and that's very much the case with G, the main character. So
that was well explored.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll let everyone else speak now. Thank you for giving us that room. But we'll jump onto the main questions that I have today, which sort of involve everyone for. We'll go with the year for you, Jay. I know you've been writing, and Steve, if you've been writing, you don't tend to read a whole lot while you're doing that. So feel free to amend the questions for yourselves as we go through. But we'll just go clockwise, starting with Jeff. So the first question that I have for the group is: what has been your favorite queer read discovered over the last quarter or year for our newbies?
Yeah, I already mentioned it, so don't need to say much more. Our Share of Night, Mariana Enriquez. Immediately after I finished this, I went and read her first novel, and then I went and read one of her short story collections. I'm obsessed with Mariana Enriquez. Her writing is so addictive, and like the way that she explores really interesting, cool themes. She deals with like a lot of like Argentina went through like a dictatorship and like the dirty war, where like lots of people were disappeared and tortured and all these awful things, and she kind of writes about that sort of stuff in really interesting, cool ways. And yeah, she's just unafraid to include queer people in her stories. And they're not good, they're not bad, they're just people. So yeah, I really respect her for that aspect of it, her storytelling. And they're just great stories. She's just really, really good. Like, yeah.
You have convinced me to buy everything from that author. So thank you.
Please do.
So
Is it freeform, or are you going to call on people?
Oh, free for all. Rodger's next.
Oh, there we go.
Well, I was very quickly pulling up my reading spreadsheet while Jeff was talking. I was like, what have I read in the last like 6 months? I don't know. I guess the best like queer relationship that I've read recently was in the Rook and Rose trilogy by M.A. Carrick, the author duo. They have he's kind of a main POV character-ish in books 2 and 3, but he starts off, you kind of think that maybe he's just being performatively gay and like kind of doing it to try to manipulate somebody, but it kind of deepens and becomes more and more interesting. And so I guess maybe that one, and that is very political fantasy with kind of really interesting magic systems built almost around, one of them's kind of around tarot, and one of them's almost more like a mathematical based magic system, and it's kind of these communities kind of colliding with their different philosophies and beliefs, and there is a bigger threat, but it's much more about the character dynamics and relationships and the kind of the political maneuverings going on.
I think I've got that one on my TBR slotted for next year. That
The
entire
Mask Mirrors.
trilogy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Jay, over to you.
I think for me, it actually fits in with your Hollow Queen. I know a lot of people have read them already, but I just discovered them, which was the whole Lesser Known Monsters series by Rory Michelson, which I had a blast with. I mean, it was as sort of I was doing my Spiffbo readings, as it happened to just by happenstance, 7 Degrees of Separation fell into those, and I just thought they were just kind of great beach read, decompress ones. I really liked the characters. I thought it was great. and just a whole lot of fun. Actually, it helped me with my writing queer characters, especially trans queer characters, of how to just let them be and not necessarily make a big deal about what their history might have been. And I thought that was really refreshing to see, and the way that it was handled in those books early on. Book one, I was like, that's brilliant.
I love that.
No, it's super cool. Like, I definitely appreciate when people can kind of do that. Definitely, I feel like there's a tendency nowadays, and I feel like it's the heavy hand of publishing again, and often sort of like straight editors and straight publishers who are worried about like, well, will the straight cis audience get it, kind of a thing, trying to kind of make more of a thing of queerness sometimes in works, or to explain a bit too much. And then when you read it, it feels really clunky. I always feel bad for the authors then, because it's like, I know you probably wrote this a lot more smoothly and a lot more nuanced and a lot more, and then it got edited to be this. So yeah, so that sounds fantastic. I made a list of books, which was ill-advised. But the last time I was answering questions on a podcast, and like I was asked, like, what are your horror influences? And I said an episode of My Little Pony, because I panicked and like
Look, that show is scary. So
yeah, I mean, it's not the one though that you're probably thinking of. It was like the 80s one that I grew up with. It was like, I'll talk about the episode again. It's called Escape from Midnight Castle, and an evil centaur man kidnaps the ponies and transforms them into dragons, which like then I psychoanalyzed myself with in terms of like transness and like transformation and horror anyway. But it was like my favorite thing growing up was that episode. So, which I also forgot the title of in the podcast where I was talking to the person. So it was like this random episode of My Little Pony. Anyway, I'm sorry. So 3 books that I really enjoyed this past year that were queer books. Sorrowland by Rivers Solomon. Have any of you guys read that one? It's really
not read it, but I've heard about it.
It made me there's some plot elements, I won't say what, because it's a spoiler for both books, but there's some plot elements in common with my book, The Erstwhile Tyler Kyle, and she does them so much better. And so after reading it, I was like, oh fuck. But it's such a textured read, and it's such a visceral read. But essentially it's about this woman, and she uses she, her pronouns throughout the novel, but sort of identifies as non-binary essentially without kind of having the vocabulary to describe that. And she grows up in this sort of Black, community that's really isolated. It's basically kind of a cult, and it's very religious. She ends up sort of fleeing from the community after having been assaulted by her husband, this man she's like forced to marry. So this book is not for the faint of heart in terms of that kind of material, for sure. She gives birth to twins who she raises in the wilderness. And it's all about, to some extent, her relationship with environment and human beings' relationship with environment. I did an analysis of it. Part of the reason I read it was not just because I wanted to, but also for a paper I was writing at the time, which was about sort of like fungal horror. So like fungi is like the monster, and there's an element of it where she has these kinds of powers, and they're kind of like fueled by her connection that she has to this sort of like mycelial fungal network that exists sort of under the forest. And it really kind of explores, I would say, like both queer rage and sort of Black rage as well in the novel. But it's not all sort of negativity, for sure. There's a lot of really beautiful passages, and I would encourage people to pick it up. River Solomon, they're a like brilliant writer. I'm convinced just the lyricism of their prose in various parts was really mind-boggling. So that one for sure. Am I allowed to talk about the 2 other ones, or should I stop? Or
go for it. Open forum.
Okay. So the other one, which was also from my paper,
TBR, Steve.
yeah. the other one, the next one was also for my paper that I was writing on the fungal imaginary, I called it, but like mushroom monsters, is a Norwegian book by a Norwegian author, Jenny Fall, which I read in translation, and it's called Paradise Rot. It's a really weird. I see you nodding, Jeff. Have you read this one?
I haven't read it, but I've seen it.
Yeah, it's weird as fuck. It's really trippy. I loved it. It's if you like poetry at all, you'll probably be into it. If you like surrealism, you'll probably like it. Basically, like describing the plot is almost impossible, but this woman moves to England, basically. She's a grad student. I think she's a grad student, but she's a student anyway at university, and she moves in with some person over a brewery, and the apartment starts to rot, and they also start to rot, and their bodies start to like combine together, but also they may be each other and also dead, and they're having sex with this dude and in this weird like toxic polycule, but she's also like closeted gay, and like there's just like a lot of queerness and a lot of body horror, specifically like where the body is sort of like disintegrating and kind of melding with the environment, particularly like rotting fruit. And again, it's very like I said, it's surreal, and it's also very much kind of like in Sorrowland, sort of channeling I would say sort of like feminine rage in this case, and specifically as it relates to control over the body and that kind of thing. So it's a lot, but it's a very fast read. And I've never read anything like it, and I the closest is maybe Vandermeer or something, but very very strange and very well done, I would say, haunting. And then the last one, I promise, is Julia Armfield's Our Wives Under the Sea, which is a sapphic book. I think both characters are lesbians, but it's been a while since I read this one. I read it back in like February. That one's probably more well known, I think, than Paradise Rot. And it's if you like undersea horror at all, like the horror of what lurks in the deep or anything like that, you'll probably enjoy this. No, I love that stuff.
Really hard pass.
Yeah. Is it too close to home in Australia where like
it's too close to home in Florida, and I go to the beach way too often for me. I can't. I just dark water is like I can't.
That's amazing. Oh my god. I just like devour like anything like that. And I don't know if I grew up on an island in Newfoundland, and like so we're very like proximate to like the dangers of the ocean and the dangers of weather and stuff like that. So maybe it was a similar emotion that like drew me to it, or I don't know. This one I'd say like it's not terrifying, I will say that, but basically some people one half of this couple is a marine biologist or some kind of marine scientist, and she goes under the ocean to study the deep sea in some kind of special vessel, which may sort of like post this summer like evoke all kinds of other feelings and memories. And she comes back changed, basically, and it's told dual POV between the wife who's back home in their above ocean apartment, and then the other wife who's under the ocean, and she's dealing with this possible like weird entity they've encountered under the sea that's changing her on like a cellular level. It's very well done. There's probably all kinds of like metaphorical ways of interpreting the novel in terms of like the changing nature of relationships between individuals and that kind of stuff, but it's also just a very good kind of surreal, slightly spooky, psychological, I would say, horror novel too. So that's End Rent. Yeah. All the books.
No, we love it. Paradise Rot sounds like it's right up my alley. I love some weird ass horror, like blending with surrealism. So like I'm gonna check that one out for sure.
Yeah.
For me, the favorite read of the last quarter kind of shocked me, and this is quite a popular one in the indie scene. It's Legacy of the Brightwash by Crystal Matar. I'm not a romance reader. This book has more romance than I would normally read, but it is so unapologetically bi for this main character. And I would say the plot of this book is more crime, mystery. The magic system is kind of cool. It only starts to be explored in this. We have conversations of how people deal with trauma, and if you let that trauma eat away at you versus if you use that to empower your life, and how you go about moving on from those things. And it can go either way. Some conversations about authoritarianism and the imbalance of power between certain people. But essentially we follow Tashaway Blackwood, who is a lawman, and he's never really questioned the authority before. He just goes about his day, does what he needs to do, until he finds a limbless child washed up on the Brightwash. And the child has a tattoo on the back of their neck. So the question he asks himself is, who would tattoo a child? And then it sort of goes through his discovery of maybe the authority isn't what he thought it was, if they're hiding this sort of thing, and why have they've been allowed to get away with this so far. But it's so character driven that the plot happens in the first 10%, and then you really sit with the characters and you build with the characters the entire way through. And Matar has done such a good job of building a plot as a secondary to the characters. So things are happening in the background, but they only really come together in the last, I would say, 20%, when all of that foreshadowing starts to drop in. And you go, oh, that's what we were doing this entire time. But I already love the characters. I will say my favorite character in this book is not any of the queer rep, though. It would be the child Ceridwen. I do not want children of my own, but far out if this kid in this book didn't make my dusty old trans man ovaries cough to life at some point, being like, maybe kids aren't so bad, but she was so charming. But yeah, that book really shocked me and was a favorite of the quarter. Sorry for everyone talking about dusty old trans man's ovaries. Anyway, the next question that we have is the year. So what is your favorite queer character or read of the entire year thus far? Starting with you, Jeff.
I decided to go with a romance book, and I went with Role Playing by Kathleen Yardley. It is a romance book where this man and woman meet via a massive multiplayer online role-playing game, like a version of what's that video game?
Warcraft.
That's it. Thank you. Not my world, but that sort of a game. And it was just, and they're both in their late 40s. They both haven't been in a relationship for maybe a decade. The male main character is bisexual and demisexual. And it's not really until he meets this woman that he is actually able to explore those aspects of himself without feeling shame. So it was just a really cute, funny, nice romance book, while also it was just experiencing these older people falling in love again. And I always just find especially just with my personal history of reading a lot of queer YA or queer young people, seeing a queer older person who's maybe kind of given up on the idea of living their authentic selves later in life and finding love again. It was just really, really nice. Really, yeah, it was nice. It was really good. It's a little bit spicy, and the first sex scene they have, they're the first sex scene, they're they haven't had sex in a decade, and it's almost seeing teenagers having sex for the first time, and they're really kind of endearing. Oh, this is kind of weird because you're older, but this is cute. I really recommend it. It was really good.
Okay, for me, it's probably still In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune, it is, I think marketing did it kind of dirty, kind of almost trying to pitch it like it's a Pinocchio retelling. It's more like a dystopian story with some Pinocchio flavor on it. There'll be like random things that you'll like recognize, like a ship that they call Monstro, like the whale from the Pinocchio story and like that kind of stuff. But it's really about this boy who is pretty much the last living human on Earth, and everybody else is these like automatons. And then one day he meets this other automaton and he needs to help him replace his heart. And so they kind of go on a journey together. And it's, I'd say it's probably more leaning towards the 8th spectrum for the romance. It's not really like hot and heavy or spice or anything like that. It's kind of these two, well, I mean, a being and a person. I was going to say two people, but one of them's obviously not a person. But they kind of are just coming to get to know each other, and they kind of have this kind of sweet, very wholesome kind of coming together. And then the other one, because I can't not, would be A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. It's the prequel to Priory of the Orange Tree, but there was an older lesbian couple in it, and it was just so nice seeing an established couple instead of always having to have people in the throes of the first time they ever met and screw the world, we're gonna bang here when everything else burnt. Like, I'm so over that. And so seeing a couple kind of, they would also have disagreements on how to approach some of the problems, and they would have arguments, but they would always kind of come back together and kind of have a really kind of healthy relationship dynamic. And that's kind of rare to find because it always has to be kind of drama and people breaking up or whatever. Did you grab a book?
Yeah, I did.
The mystery.
For my turn.
And now we have to sit in like anticipation of what the book
I'll
is.
wait for my turn.
Yes, I love what you said too, Rodger, about like established couples and everything, and like so often like we're not allowed to see that, sort of, regardless, to be honest, of like, you know, straightness or queerness or any of that. Like it's there's a pressure to kind of write couples who are sort of like, you know, like you said, in the throes of drama, or, you know, if they are established, then something has to happen to kind of like threaten their relationship in some way. So it's,
or one of them has to die in a horrific way.
yeah,
especially in their
I mean,
literature.
obviously.
So then they have to pine forever.
Yeah, except in the best books, they come back to life.
It's
afterwards.
like my whole book one.
Spoiler alert. For any-
It's also funny because I feel like A Day of Fallen Night is the closest that Steve and my taste would overlap, because I am a reader for fun and you are much more of a cerebral reader. And so I think A Day of Fallen Night has a lot of those elements that a reader like you would appreciate more, because Samantha Shannon really is trying to make a very like female forward world. Her whole world building is built around like womanhood and the idea of like the world birthing these dragons into, like, there's a lot to unpack from what she
Very
does.
cool. Yeah. I like a considered kind of approach to, like, I like fun. I'm fun, I think.
See, I've been
Probably
trying to convince
actually,
Roger I'm also fun for like years.
I feel like, Rodger, though, like, you read me in the way that my friends would read me and be like, this person is not very fun. Like,
I think you're fun as a person, but your reading, you seem to be much more academic in the way that you approach it. And whether that's because the books that you were talking about were for a paper, or because that's how you approach
Yeah.
every book, who knows? But
yeah, I mean, I have fun. I have fun being analytical, I guess. That's my kind of fun. Even if it's something lighthearted, like, you know, I'll come in and like just like destroy it, basically. I'm evil. But I'm supposed to say something now. Yes.
I think it's Tallsquall's turn, right?
Oh, either way.
Oh my God! Sorry, I jumped in because, like, yeah, no.
Because I called you out and read you a little bit.
Well, actually, I mean, well, because I'm going to be the dork who's been writing all year, and I mean, I can't not say my favorite queer character is Talon from book one, but I mean, you know, I'm a first-time author. I mean, that's so autobiographical in so many ways, and you know, it was cathartic for me to write. It's been really interesting rediscovering it, because you know, I had a friend of mine who was a voice actor basically do the audiobook, you know, between gigs, you know, type idea, because just as a, you know, resume filler for himself, and also because he enjoyed the book. and to rediscover it, because as it's been recorded practically over 7-8 months, I'm just getting chapters at a time as well, to sort of rediscover my own writing as I've moved on to other ones. It's just sort of one of those things where it's just like, oh, where it just kind of hits you. It's like, wow, that's right. I went all the way there in my life and just put that right out in the book. But yeah, so there's that. But I will also say, so that's kind of rediscovering the book one. My absolute favorite as of today is a character you all meet in book 2 that is just my cinnamon roll character that is so, too young, too innocent, too naive, and just like, again, I'm the old ace guy, just like brings this breath of fresh air to like the entire book and everything around them. And it's, I can't wait for people to discover them in book 2. So there, I did my used car sales days. Hey, I'm not going to tell you about another, but I'm going to tell you about my book.
It felt really smooth to me, and like I've seen that done in a much more like duplicitous way before, and this was not that, and so like props. But also I'm really concerned now about the autobiographical piece, given that there's like an evil sword that talks to Talon. Like
there's a fantasy overlay, but yeah, no. It's interesting. There are a lot of allegories in this.
For sure. Yeah. As a kid, I feel like I had a bit of a like mischievous evil voice, to be honest. So I related to those parts. But pranks and stuff. So my favorite queer character so far this year has been Jake Livingston from I'm blanking on the title. Hold on, I'll get my document back up.
The title is the name.
I only just read it.
The Haunting of Jake Livingston.
The Taking of Jake Livingston.
The Taking, sorry.
Yeah. I keep wanting to say Rusty Douglas, but his name is Ryan. And Rusty
Ryan
is
Douglas.
a much less common name, so I don't know why I keep wanting to say that. But Ryan Douglas, who seems like a fantastic person. And it's actually a YA horror novel. I'm not a big YA reader. I've liked some YA books for sure, but it doesn't tend to be what I gravitate toward. And I did actually give this 3 stars on Goodreads, but not because of the characterization. I actually thought that was fantastic. Jake Livingston, to me, was a very relatable protagonist. He's a Black man, and he's dealing with stuff obviously I've never had to deal with. Or anything like that, or experience personally, but he's this kind of like nerdy, more introverted, like gay teenager, and he's a bit more kind of intellectual. He's frustrated with the curriculum at his school, which is conservative to say the least. Like a lot of his experiences of being queer are very like internalized. And I thought, Douglas just brought that beautifully to the page. There's also a lot in the novel, not from Jake's perspective necessarily, but from other characters about sort of abuse and that kind of thing, that I felt like were just dealt with wonderfully in the novel. Like all of the sort of like non-speculative elements, I actually thought like were 5-star for me. And Jake, like I really felt the character leap off of the page. So he was for sure my favorite, queer character, I think, of the year. Yeah. Felt really real. There's like good, well done queer romance for me anyway. I know some readers didn't agree on that aspect, but I actually thought it was done really well. I liked those parts. So yeah. Yep.
Have you read that one, Jeff?
Yes, I also gave it 3 stars, but like I also loved it weirdly.
Those books exist.
yeah, like technically, like oh, this is not that, but I like my heart was with it, but like there were technical aspects that. The one kind of warning I would give about that book is that it has to do with school shootings.
Yes,
not that there's one portrayed in the story, but there's like that's an aspect of it that like when I opened the first chapter, I was like, oh my god, no.
Jay, I have to say your dog is so well behaved, just sitting like
Oh, she's a darling.
just hanging out, not
Yeah.
doing.
She's old.
Not-
I mean, she's not that old. She's old, it's only 7, but yeah, no, her whole gig is like this. This is Lunar.
I've had to turn my mic off a few times because my mother's dogs are just going apeshit around the
I
people
love
walking.
one of the episodes, like your dad was exercising and the dog was barking and
Oh
you
my God.
apologized or something. I thought that was fantastic. I don't know. It's
I've
just
had
like,
to warn. They're moving out next week, and I had to be like quiet chores only from the next hour and a half, please. So he's like in the next room ironing, but I can hear him singing. You guys can't, but I can hear him singing in there. So
what's
my
his name?
favorite queer character of 2023 is not just blow smoke up Jay's ass, but also is Talon
Oh my gosh.
from Legacy of the Vermilion Blade. And the reason for me is that Talon taught me something, and I'm sort of learning. This is a question we'll touch on later, but learning that I now look for queer stories that will teach me something about other parts of the rainbow and other parts of myself. And Talon really made me think, and it made me go and research the asexual experience. We got to see Talon growing up and learning it for himself, and then becoming sort of moving into middle age and what that looks like over a lifetime. And I just thought it was so well done, and like books that make me think like that really just like I took a lot away from it. And I was nerdy, and I messaged Jay after I read the book, and I was like, thank you for doing this, because it was an experience that I'd never thought about before. It's not my lived experience, but now I feel like I can bring something to that conversation if other people don't understand what that experience means. So just for that fact, like I just really, really loved learning about it, and I thought it was done in such an authentic way that felt like growth throughout the entire story. And I would really recommend that people read it. People who aren't questioning that side of their sexuality, even just to get a form of understanding of that side of things.
So totally don't mind as I like shatter on screen. Thank you so much. I mean, I can't even tell you what it means, because that's why I wrote it. It started as the backstory for a D&D campaign that then sort of turned into a novella. And then I had a discussion with one of my friend's friends who was sort of questioning their identity. It was out as gay, but was not fitting in with the gay culture, with a lot of the sexualized aspect of it. And he was hearing a lot of the same things that this middle friend that I was telling about my experience. And so he was like, we Zoom every month. Do you want to just jump in? And so we, talked, the three of us, for like just a little bit, nothing detail. He said, I'm going to hop off and let the two of you talk. We ended up talking for like the next 3.5 hours. And he had such a limited view, even from a therapist, of what asexuality is and what it looks like in this just very narrow, robotic, celibate, no libido version of asexuality, that when I started talking about it, and I could see him coming alive with, wait a second, okay, that's making sense. And I hung up from that call and said, I need to turn this into a book. I need to write this so that people can read a story about what it means to be asexual and what it means to be asexual over a lifetime. I mean, I'm 52 years old, and how you reinvent yourself, and that it's okay to walk away from an old life and start a new one, and that we aren't necessarily defined by our life, but by our relationships, by the people who touch our lives, are the people is what we take with us from chapter to chapter of our life and decade to decade. And like I said, I can't tell you how much it means. I mean, to even have one person take that away means the world to me. So thank you.
That was something I really loved about the story as well, is that it was about being able to start again and not worrying so much about, oh, I'm this age, I should be doing this. Like, no, that chapter is closed. I can now go and do this, and finding meaning in doing that and finding those relationships. Like, it was really beautifully written, and I can't wait to read book 2.
No,
The
I need
other
to read
one
it,
that,
so thanks for that, I guess.
yeah,
Fucker.
I think you'll enjoy it.
It's
The
so
other one that I
good.
do want to shout out quickly before we move on to the next question is The Iron Crown, which is the book I went and picked up. For everyone who is looking at it, if we're talking about established adult sapphic relationships, this book has a really beautiful relationship in it, and they've been together for 7 years. The excitement's not in there. They bicker about things, but they sort of come together at the end of the day, like, oh no, I really love this person. And you just see it in their interactions with each other, and they get split up, and one will think, oh, this person would love X, because you just think about your person all the time. If you've been in a long-term established relationship, it's, oh, my decisions don't affect just me, they affect somebody else. And I thought that was really nice in the Iron Crown, and LL McRae did a really good job of that established relationship. As a general rule, LL McRae doesn't really write new relationships or a whole lot of romance in her books, and when she does, it's either no romance or an established relationship. So yeah, I thought that was really nice for anyone looking for that sort of thing. So next one, the shame game. Are there any LGBTQIA plus books that you've started this year that you still need to finish and you haven't? I love that people are like pulling stuff off their bookcases. Over to you, Jeff.
No shame, absolutely zero shame. I am reading this book, Regimes of Desire, Young Gay Men, Media and Masculinity in Tokyo by Thomas Bordenette. It is an academic book, that's why it's taking me so long. It's like half really interesting and half really boring. It's like anthropological, sociological. It'll be like, oh, Japanese society is patriarchal and the man is responsible for the, like, it's like, it gives like a lot of like it assumes that you know nothing kind of thing, and it just like establishes everything in a very like detailed and it establishes everything, but it's really interesting. It's about it focuses on this gay neighborhood in Tokyo, Shinjuku. I can't remember the specific part of Shinjuku. And it's just kind of boring but interesting, which is why it's taking me so long. It's really interesting to like learn about. It specifically focuses on gay men, and like gay men's attitudes about their own sexuality and their own sexuality in relation to society, and their the kind of like patriarchal upbringing and things like that. It raised this really interesting thing about like manga, like boys love manga, that like it is written usually it is written by women and for women, and that like if you examine a lot of boys love, the gay like boys, there's no introspection about their own sexuality. They don't come out to people. They don't have any like there's no references to like gay popular culture. There's no coming out. There's no internal gay world. It's just like two boys. And so there are a lot of like Japanese men that don't regard this as gay media. There are some people who do, but like it's so it's just like really interesting to like a different cultural experience of what it means to be gay. I don't necessarily recommend it, but you know, it's interesting.
I don't think there's any books that I started this year that I need to finish. The only two that I didn't finish, one was a hard DNF, and the other one was softer, but I don't think either of them have anything queer about them or the authors or anything like that.
You're not a
So
DNFer.
no.
Are you?
Well, no, I mean, one of them was Trials of Ashmount?
Oh yeah, that's right. It was pretty
whatever.
dark.
I hated it. It was, no, absolutely fucking not. And then The other one was the other better read we were supposed to be doing. I don't think there's anything queer about, what is it? Rebirth, Remnant, whatever?
Oh, Divinities.
Divinity
Yeah.
something?
No.
Those are the only two that I've DMF'd. I finished everything else I'm at, I think. I don't know. It kind of blurs together. I've read over 100 books so far this year, so I don't know anymore.
Jay, have you got anything you need to finish this year that you started?
So do I get to count like all the things I bought and haven't started? Because that's the problem, is I've got like just tons of, or the other one is the series that I've read book 1, bought book 2, read like the first chapter, and then haven't gotten any further. So I will step back from this conversation.
I once again had a list, but also I just wanted to say to Jeff, like Ari, like your comments and stuff, like the book sounds really interesting. The one that's interesting but boring, which by the way is like, I don't know, I feel like a lot of academics would genuinely love to hear that as feedback. It's like, it's just like, it's, I don't know, it's great. But also like I this was very recently, I saw somebody kind of talking about the boys love thing, because like that whole idea that it's like written for women by women, particularly straight women, more so has kind of been something that's been predominant in the conversations around that for a while now. But increasingly now there's been a conversation as well about like, okay, but in a really cisnormative culture, is it not also potentially like a space where like trans men can also explore that as well? So I don't know a lot about it, so I don't want to like, like state too, intensely that is the case, but like I've seen that being sort of bandied about as like an interpretation.
Yeah, there's also like the aspect of like men disrespecting media made for women.
Yeah. Oh,
like,
yeah.
So like, yeah, like I totally see the criticisms. And like, and I think that like, well, if we're still gonna talk about this later, like a book that like shocked us, Kris.
Oh,
Do we still
yeah.
have that question? Yeah, I'll bring up a different thing that's in relation to that later.
Oh, it's cool. I can't wait. Yeah, I'm really
Yeah, I
enjoying
realized I missed that question, so I was writing it like in the banner before.
So my books, I like, much like Jay and probably like a lot of us, I have a lot of books I haven't got to yet, like that I just haven't even cracked, that I've picked up. So there's a lot of those. One of the ones I am currently reading that I'm listening to on audio is The Legacy of the Vermilion Blade. Yeah, which I'm really enjoying. And I got to a real sort of like turning point. I think it's part 3. Maybe you want to correct me on that.
Yes, big turning point.
Big turning point. Yeah,
between part 2 and part 3.
I can't give spoilers, but without spoilers, I'll say Thorn to indicate. Yeah. So like, and it was just like balls to the wall. Like I'm very much enjoying it. The only thing standing in my way from like binging it is like, the need to work and things like that, and
How'd you hate that?
I'll do my plug. Audiobook 100% out on my podcast for free for anyone who wants to read or listen. It's only about I think it's 11 hours, whatever. But I mean, the nice part is it's most chapters are like 15 to 17 minutes, so it's like perfect commuting listening.
Or dish doing.
Or dish doing, or any of that type of stuff. Yeah,
a lot of 8-minute chapters that then you can just kind of listen to, like let them cascade. So like that's one I'll probably be finished it pretty soon, because I think I'm on like I keep wanting to say episode, but like chapter 22 or 23, I think.
Yeah.
So pretty far into it, I'd say. It's chapter 38 is the last one.
38. Yep.
38.
Just dropped today. Look,
yeah,
I'm telling you, I told you, Kris, I'm going to be promoting the whole time. I am your local used car salesman on your queer show.
I said go for it. Go for it. That's what this is all about.
So the other ones that I'll go with ones I'm actively reading. So I've also recently started, and I have the physical of this, so I can actually hold a book up, which is nice. Ian McConnell's, who I know is Aaron, which is why I had to look at the name. The Sunset Sovereign, also a Spiffbo book, so you may recognize it too, Jay. I'm really enjoying this one so far. I'm really not very far in it, but the writing is just top notch, and I feel like that's an important thing to say, because like, I don't know, I think writing quality is important, which apparently is a controversial opinion. according to Twitter. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, it's also a little bit subjective because if the grammar can be correct, but the
Oh,
style
yeah.
of writing,
Right.
yeah,
which Twitter not very good for.
I
No.
will say I've been so impressed, and again, I haven't read all the full depth of the 300 books in Spitbo, but the ones that you hear people talking about, there's not one that I have picked up that hasn't been as well written, if not better written, than some of the mainstream stuff. I don't know. One of my friends, we did a buddy read of The Witcher. Dear God, that thing's horrible to read. I mean, that man's never seen a comma. He didn't.
I mean, it is also a translated work, so.
Oh, is it? Okay, so
Wait
now,
for Rodger to
okay,
come
so
in.
I'm not going to
Polish.
be as harsh. I had this is how little I knew about The Witcher.
It's from originally in Polish, so like,
Yeah,
a lot of the humor and stuff.
I'm sure it's bad in Polish too.
But
It's probably better.
God, that
There's
man's never
games
seen
Don't blame it on the
Not the
translator.
I mean, just sentences that are pages long. You're just like, dear God, give me a period here somewhere. It's like 3 semicolons, 2 commas, and an M dash later, and we're still not to the end of the sentence. Sorry, I digress.
Yeah, this is really well written. It is subjective. It is subjective. I absolutely agree, Rodger. Like it's that would have been my caveat in like the follow-up tweet if I were trying to like say something on Twitter, which is really hard. But like I think like the conversation around writing quality, to me it's sort of like if you try and translate that to visual art or something and you say actually no, it doesn't matter how well you draw, it's actually just the ideas. Like you're edging into the territory that a lot of the AI users are kind of saying, to be honest. So I think it's quite a dangerous kind of argument to start to make. But that said, writing quality is absolutely subjective. But like there's a base level of like, this is, it goes beyond just being readable and comprehensible. And there's a flow and a clarity, which is what I try to teach my students at university, to the prose. And there's like a POV to it, and there's a style to it. And, like those are the things, like whatever the style or the POV is of the author, like the authorial voice, that can change. But like, and that part is subjective. But as long as it has that, like that's to me like what elevates something. It's like, okay, I may not personally like this, but this person's writing from like, it's more than just sort of like, Deirdre, I don't know why I picked this name. This was a bad name to pick. Went for a walk. Deirdre sat on a bench, like, there was a dragon, etc. So, yeah, so this really well written. It's got kind of so far almost like it's definitely fantasy, but it's got almost like touches of Resident Evil, which I say very much as a compliment as a big Resident Evil nerd. So I very much recommend. And the other two I'm reading from my list of books are Leather and Lace by Megan Cubed, trans writer. It's kind of like True Bloody, I guess. I never read the Sookie Stackhouse books, so I can't comment on how similar it is to those. But it's sort of like that, except like really gay, which is awesome. And yeah, kind of like a bit supernatural, but gay as well. I also haven't seen Supernatural really, so this is all just like me basing it off of what my students tell me about Supernatural. And the other one I'm reading currently is an erotica series by Maxime Jazz from our Spiffbo class as well, called Donum, which is sort of like a Roman slave romance-y. It's not really romance, I guess, but erotica, yeah, like which I've only just started. Oh, and I was gonna plug my partner's book too, which is also erotica. I'm sorry, which we call it Sexy Demon Times. It's a series of like short novelettes, basically. But the actual title, which I have up here so that I don't call it Sexy Demon Times, is called Asher's Collar, and my partner is Noelle Heartstone, who writes under that pseudonym. It has the benefit of like. It's porn with plot, and it's gay erotica written by a gay man, which I do feel like is something that's needed in terms of like there just being like an overwhelming amount of, kind of as the boys love thing would indicate, like a lot of what gets published is actually written by cis women. So yeah, so that's it for my currently reading.
I'm pretty similar to Rodger in that I don't DNF a whole lot. Like if I start a book, I'll just read it. But I did start one this morning, which I haven't finished, which is A Hired Blade by J.C. Rycroft. So this is only a novella, but I've had one of my subscribers like monthly come into my Instagram DMs and be like, "Read this book, like just read it." And I didn't have time to add in the first book, the Bloodborne Dragon, on my TBR. So she was like, read the novella. It's 92 pages. You can do 92 pages. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll read the novella. And it's really good. It's apparently there's an amazing consent scene in this novella between two women, which I don't think I've hit yet, but it's quite charming the way that it's written. It's first person, so that's subjective. Some people don't like first person written novels, but I think it's super engaging, and I'm already like wanting to know about the characters, and I'm not a character driven reader, so to say that is, quite good. But I think I will try and pick up book one now because the novella
I
is
like how you
quite
say you're not a
enjoyable.
character-driven reader, but then one of your favorite things was Legacy of the Bright Watch, where you literally said like 80% of it is character-driven with no plot.
Because when they're done well,
and then you're like, I don't like
me.
romance, but I love A Taste of Golden Iron and whatever this other one was. Inconsistency.
Okay. To be fair, Taste of Golden Iron, Evermere is basically me in book form, so I like related so hard to that character that I was like, oh, he's also a Ponce. Just like, who loves the rules? Virgo life, man. Like,
that's very relatable.
What it is. But yeah, that's the only thing that I haven't finished, but I should finish it today. Just in the essence of time, I've sort of condensed the last few questions into 2 questions. So we've got 2 to go. And the next one is, has there been a book or a character, I guess, an LGBTQIA plus character that has shocked you over the last quarter or year, and how?
Yeah.
Just been waiting for it.
Oh, I'm so excited. So my one is called The Summer Hikaru Died by Moku Mokuren. I think it's a pseudonym, actually. I couldn't find anything much about the author. It's about this guy, Hikaru, and this other guy, Yoshiki. They're high school students in like a rural high school at a high school in rural Japan. And it's a YA horror romance. Hikaru goes into the forest and disappears for 2 days, and then just kind of suddenly comes back. But the person who's come back isn't Hikaru. It's a monster, kind of. Like, this is the premise of the story. I don't know if you can see. No, wait. And it's just like this beautiful like artwork. Like the translation of the dialogue is like very like colloquial and informal. There are like it includes a lot of like the sound effects, weirdly enough. Really cool story, really interesting. And the way that it's unlike other kind of like BL is that you have Hikaru, who is this monster, and he has this secret, and he's like kind of ashamed of his secret, and he's kind of coming out in a sense to Yoshiki. There's kind of like the beginnings of a queer romance between them. And the reason why it shocked me was the intimacy. Like, there's no sex in it, but there's like this really tender but also very frightening, like the times when he kind of like shows his true form as like a monster are like these moments of like really personal like love for each other, but also like terror. And it really just captures like that feeling of like when you're a queer person, like telling someone like who you are, the fear of that, and like how scary it can be to be vulnerable in that way. And maybe for even like the other person, like having to deal with that information, and maybe they are queer themselves or maybe they're not. And like there's this kind of like negotiation of how much am I going to give of myself to this other person. I'm just like super impressed with everything about it. Super highly recommended. The second volume has come out this month, so yeah, I love it.
for me, the only thing that comes to mind is something that shocked me, but not in a good way. And that would be a certain relationship in The Fragile Threads of Power by V.E. Schwab. It's the follow-up trilogy to the Darker Shades of Magic trilogy. And there was a gay couple in the original trilogy that is still around in the follow-up trilogy. And there is this kind of woman added to the dynamic for the convenience of kind of public perception, but it almost gets presented like it's supposed to be a throuple, but it's not, because the two men love each other and have a very sweet relationship, and she's kind of just there as a plot device to be like this evil scientist, and I hated it so much. Like, I was just like, why the fuck is this character here? Like, I was so mad. I was like, just let them be together, let them adopt a child if they wanted one. You don't need to have this woman all of a sudden just appear out of nowhere, and there's like no love between, and it was really strange, and I hated that aspect of that book.
Is she like a beard? Is she acting like a beard?
No, not really, because it was a queer normative world in the original trilogy, which is why it felt even more like, why the hell did you include this now? Like, it just felt really like, oh. But she's there because she's like this evil scientist who makes cool magical things, and that feeds into the plot, because then there's this magical device that, and I'm just like, well.
I've not picked up V.E. Schwab yet. I own a few, but I have not gone down that route.
Dark Shades of Magic you might like. I don't know if you'd like the other two books. You might like the first book, and then you'd probably be over it.
Steve doesn't think so.
You could read it as a standalone and just pretend like that's it.
I have spicy V.E. Schwab opinions. So.
Well, I think it's because, I mean, you're kind of a writing snob, and her writing is not exactly like...
I was so disappointed by the villain one, but yeah.
I think for me, and it's not necessarily a series I would recommend. I loved the world building. I loved book one, and then it just sort of, but it's the Broken Earth series, fifth season, Obelisk Gate and Stone Sky, and again, love the world building, love the concept. Was not real pleased with the way that they tied everything together in book three, but there is a wonderful throuple, wonderfully written throuple, and I'm trying not to give away. There's a wonderfully written throuple that it was. Again, just nothing in my experience, not that I've personally, and again, being asexual, it's really, I don't want to say the other end of the spectrum, but certainly was just not within my experience. And I guess I'll sort of look to Kris on this one. I learned something because I absolutely got it. And I was like, no, it was so natural for that relationship to become the relationship that it was, and I learned something. So I mean, I'll take that, from your statement earlier. And so shocking in a, oh, okay, I get that now. I see that now. I understand that now, and how that works and why it works. Because damn, I mean, it was a spicy scene too. And I'm not a big spice reader, and I'm like, hell yeah. So
that was such a good part of those books. I really liked those books. And I think I liked the end. Now I'm like, did I like the end? You've created this doubt in my mind. But I liked the books generally, but that was like such a fantastic part of them. Really well done. And like, you're right, like the spice was really well done. Like, it was just very sexy, very like, yeah. And the characters were so good. So shocking things. I didn't have so much for this one. It takes a lot to shock me. Probably you guys won't be surprised by that. I don't know. I was shocked by the fact that I really didn't like Fledgling by Octavia Butler. That was one of my shocking things. I thought it was mostly really boring. That's not necessarily like an unusual opinion for that book. And I love Octavia Butler. She's one of my favorite writers. So I don't feel bad saying that, because like I just love to pieces all her other stuff. But that one, no. And the other shocking thing that I wrote down for this was like, I read Gretchen Felker Merton's Manhunt, which I really liked. I thought it was great. There were some parts of it that I loved, but overall, I thought it was good. I was shocked by the fact that it wasn't shocking to me, because she faced so much backlash for just like basically existing as a trans woman and having opinions. She was accused of all kinds of awful things online, and I read this for a book club, and I was like, I was kind of prepared for to like not agree with a lot of the negative opinions I'd heard of her, just based on the fact that, like, having read and listened to what she actually says, it's very different from what people claim that she says. But I wasn't, expecting. I was still expecting it to be a lot more like, controversial, like content or whatever in the book. And for me, it just wasn't. It was a good book with great characters. And there were some passages that I have to say, as a trans person, like they just, like it fundamentally captured what it is to be afraid, I think, as a trans person, seeing some of the stuff that's happening now and the kinds of conversations that are going on. So, all power to her. Like, so that was one of the shocking things for me, was how like not shocking this book was. And, I think more people should read it, and also that more people should, not in a weird, like, culty parasocial way that I do think some people do, but in a normal way, listen to what she's actually saying instead of what, people are claiming that she's saying about stuff. So yeah.
Can I just recommend, as an alternative to Fledgling, the Gilda Stories?
I really want to read that.
I just read this last week, I think, and I would describe it as like a mix of like Octavia Butler and Orlando by Virginia Woolf, and with vampires. Yeah, read this.
My book club's reading that one now, actually. So like I theoretically should be, but I'm listening to the Vermilion Blade, so I'm being bad.
I don't think I had anything that really shocked me this year. In terms of characters, maybe Peter from The Fall Is All There Is by C.M. Kaplan. But it wasn't that the character itself was shocking. And this was the same with Legacy of the Bright Wash and Tashaway, is what was shocking to me was just how unapologetically open they were with sexuality. And that I'm learning that I really enjoy those type of reads where it is so normative that they're like, yes, for me as a bisexual, I like men and women and I won't apologize for that. And there are interactions with men and women that aren't spoken about being different in any way. It's just, yep, with a dude now or with a woman now. And it's just, yeah. So that for me, because I was listening to that at the same time I was listening to Legacy, I had both of them happening at the same time. And they were both sort of doing the same thing. And I was like, oh, okay, we're allowed to just be people who were attracted to other people. That's wonderful. And I really enjoyed that aspect. But yeah, it doesn't really it takes a lot to actually shock me in one way or the other. All right, the last question I have, and I've just sort of mushed it together for everyone, is are there any reads, so queer reads, that you're looking forward to getting to before the end of the year? Anything on your radar? And is there anything on your radar for 2024? How big are the lists on these ones, guys?
I've got so oh no. For me, it would be On a Woman's Madness by Astrid Rumor. It's been nominated for the National Book Award for this year for translated fiction, and it takes place in Suriname, which is a Caribbean country in the northeast of like South America. And it's this woman who like lives in the countryside, and she wanted to divorce her husband, and her husband's like, no, I'm not going to divorce you. So she runs away to the city and falls in love with a woman. And I think the woman goes to prison, and they like write each other like letters in prison. It sounds really cool. 2024, not really, not that many plans. I'm not like the biggest, like, even though fantasy is like one of my bigger genres that I read, I often read like a lot of like standalone stuff. But like every year I try to do at least one like fat fantasy trilogy, like at least the completed one big trilogy a year. So next year it is it the Broken Earth trilogy? Is that what it's called? The N.K. Jemisin one?
Yep,
That's my plan. That was already my plan. This year I did the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. Fucking incredible. But yeah, next year's the year 2024 year of N.K. Jemisin for me.
I don't know that I have any by the end of the year. It's mainly like sequels for me, so I really want to read The Slain Divine. It's the end of the Vagrant Gods trilogy by David Dalglish, and while he himself is not queer, he does have a pretty prominent sapphic couple in the book, and it's one of those kind of queer normative worlds where people are just people, and that's not a big plot point is not queer trauma, because David is not part of the LGBT community, and so he kind of just has them being normal people, which is lovely to see. Other than that, I think I'm hoping that the conclusion to the Ending Fire trilogy by Sarah L. Reevey is coming out next year, and I'm also hoping that the end of the Burning Kingdom, there's a lot of fire, a Burning Kingdoms trilogy by Tasha Suri, so that would be Jasmine Throne. I hope that that comes out next year. So if they come out, I'll read them. I do have an arc of The Slain Divine, so maybe I'll get to that before the end of the year. That'd be lovely, but I think it comes out in January, and that will be another completed trilogy. So I'll just keep adding things for people who love completed trilogy.
Did you finish the Jen Lyons series yet, Rodger?
Yeah.
Missed that video.
Book 5 was amazing. Books 1 through 4 less so, but that's just because I don't like that there is always kind of a clunky narrative framework that she likes to use, where it's always this kind of attempting to be tongue-in-cheek. You're reading a book that's in the world, so then there's these footnotes that are like the person who wrote the book breaking the fourth wall, and then it's also like, because of that, especially book 1, you're literally jumping timelines every chapter. So there's a past timeline and then a medium point timeline, and at like the final 10% you get the current time. It's just like, it's kind of a little bit messy for me, but there are a lot of disaster buys, so you might like that. There's a boy who likes a girl who then starts liking a boy and feels weird about liking the boy, and then things progress.
Honestly, welcome to my life.
That's why I was like, maybe you might feel very seen.
All right, Jay, you got anything you're looking to read this year or
So I'm
next year?
desperately trying to find the name of it because I know the name's been announced, but it's the book 2 of the Creatures of Flynn, which is the first book 1 was Mordecai in Spiffbo, which I loved, by Mark Caracher. I'm not sure exactly how to say it, but loved that first book. Cannot wait for the second one, which I did see that he announced. So that's probably the biggest thing that I'm looking forward to. Just a great read. It was one of those, literally I couldn't put it down. And it was a book that I did not think I was going to like. I mean, I really didn't think I was going to like it. If I would have read the back cover, because it starts sort of with a plague, and I'm like, I don't need that right now. And man, is it good. I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. So mine won't be too bad this time, I promise. Mostly because people have already mentioned them. So like Jay's sequel, obviously. I also had the Bloodborne Dragon on my TBR. I also have The Fall Is All There Is on my TBR, and Legacy of Brightwash. So I won't say too much about those ones because they've already been talked about. So the other two that I had listed, my friend Elliot Geish got a pub deal with ECW Press. They're a sort of smaller Canadian press. They do some really interesting stuff, so check them out. And she has a book coming out called Grey Dog, and it's kind of a historical horror novel. I just have the suspicion it's going to make a big splash. I feel like it's going to be a big fucking deal. She's a very talented writer. Her short stories are out there. I share them all the time on my Twitter, so definitely go read those. But they're just like, the writing is next level. Like, it's award-winning quality stuff, like just flat out. The novel is all about like, being a historical lesbian, I guess, in the woods, and weird shit is happening, and there's body horror and creepy forests. And then the other one I wanted to talk about, mention more specifically, was Ian McConnell, Aaron, the person I mentioned earlier's novella 72 Hours, which I think released.
How good does that look?
What?
How good does that look?
It looks so good.
So
And
good.
she said she was gonna send me an arc, and she hasn't sent it. I don't know if that was like intentional, like she was trying to be nice so that like I don't know anyway, but I want it so bad. And it's like I'm pretty sure it's a novella too. So like if you like spooky stories at all, it's set in a haunted asylum. It's a short read, perfect for Halloween. Probably you could read it on Halloween in one sitting would be my guess. But the reviews have been stellar. So those are the two I really wanted to shout out in more detail.
Aaron's one of the reviewers over at Epic Indie as well, so they are part of our SPSFC group. So
Yeah.
I interact a little bit with them. So I'm happy to bug Aaron
Yeah.
about.
Oh yeah.
about
Well, I messaged Aaron before this as well, like just like because I wasn't sure about like Aaron's pronouns and stuff either. So like I was like I interact with you all the time, but I've never asked you this, and they weren't in Aaron's profile. So it's just kind of like whatever. So
I think it's she they.
she
But
they
I think it's
yeah
recently changed. Yeah.
yeah
From they them, she's put the she in there now. So
yeah. Aaron's
yes,
amazing.
I need to read some of her work because I like the prose. I love pretentious prose, as Rodger knows and pays me out about all the time. Because I'm loving Malazan and it's just overly pretentious.
In my defense, I just did a friggin' PhD. The last thing I want to do is read dry academic feeling stuff where it's just all about the bells. I don't care. Just let me see somebody get eaten by a dragon or have some cool god interview. Like, I don't care. So don't stop hating on me. It's not like I'm dumb and can't understand it. I just don't want to.
Never. So for me, the one I'm looking forward to reading, hopefully by the end of this year, is The Wolf of Withervale by Joaquin Baldwin. So I think it's either 6 or 7 parts that he's planning on releasing, but it's a queer epic fantasy, and he's basically said this series is as queer as it is epic. It is unapologetic. We're going for it. We're doing it myself. So his day job is a Disney animator. So he's created a whole lot of like graphics, and he's currently running this big competition because he's had the mask on the cover of the book created to basically do a giveaway for this mask. Anyway, it sounds great, and I've got an arc for it. It's already been released, and I didn't get to it, but I'm hoping to get to it before the end of the year. Next year, the Rook and Rose series I've got on my radar to read that whole trilogy. The Wings of Ashtaroth I would like to read in 2024. We're just ready for you to drop the next book, Steve. No pressure on that. But then I've got a couple of trad pubs that I picked up that I'd like to get to. Boys in the Valley is one of them. Have you read this one yet, Jeff? No, okay. I think you've picked it up. I think you have it somewhere.
I got the American one shipped to me because of the cover. Should I go grab it?
Oh, okay. Yeah, go get it. Let's have a look. Let's have a cover competition. And then I've got what I assume is a mystery thriller, and I picked it up purely on cover by Sapphic Nun Situation, who's like chain smoking in the cover, and I was like, yes, whatever. I don't care what this is about, but it's gonna happen. And then I read the back, and it basically just said that she's a lesbian nun who doesn't give a shit, and I was like, great, love that.
That is like all the premise you need.
Yeah, I don't need anything else. Yeah, your cover is far superior to the one I bought in a bookshop in Noosa.
Everyone I follow a lot of horror people on Instagram, and a lot of them are saying how scary this is.
I can't wait.
So I'm scared.
Don't be scared. It's fine. We'll read together. Yeah, those are the ones that I'm looking forward to. So that brings us to the end of the questions and the end of the Queer Corner. So a big thank you to everyone for joining me here today. Jeff, Rodger, thank you for coming on to a bunch of these this year. Steve, Jay, thank you so much for joining us and talking about your books and hanging out.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. It's and just a reminder to anyone, if you've made it this far in the video, an hour and a half in, that you do not need to have a YouTube platform to come onto this. This is open to members of the LGBTQIA plus community all over. If you want to come on and chat about books, queer books, then just send me a message and we'll get you on. I'd love to have enough people to do these bi-monthly once I move across to Perth, but we'll see how we go. But we'll sign off. We'll all wave and say thank you very much for joining us.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.